right, guys, I'm going to give you all the optimal plays this week, predicated on my opinion, my research, and of course, on the matchup. Historically, how good, based on this year, are these players going into this matchup? So I'm going to go into a full preparation for NFL Week 12 on all the optimal players to start at each position. I'm going to break it down, guys, actually, by the first three games. We got 3 games on Thursday on Thanksgiving. So I'm going to break down those matchups real quick and then go through the ones that go through the weekend. So it's very important you guys pay attention. To a lot of people, this is very crucial, must-win situation. So you want to make sure you start and sit the right person and make sure that if you are starting a quarterback and you're torn or a wide receiver, they have an optimal matchup. So I'm going to go through every position and give you guys all the optimal plays predicated on my research and predicated, of course, on the matchup historically. You know, are they set up for a good matchup? I'm going to dive into that. Also, this is very important. Starts and sits questions. Drop them below. I get to as many as I possibly can, specifically here on YouTube. If you're in the car, head on over to YouTube, guys. Drop your questions. If you're new to the channel, make sure you guys do subscribe. Now, I want to make you guys aware, a big episode comes out today on thetruckitlist.com. I've been talking about it. Dak's episode today, where they gift an amazing truck to an amazing person who has contributed to society. You got to check this out, guys, today. At Real Truck. Go over to at Real Truck on Instagram. It's in their bio. Head on over to thetruckitlist.com. Check out this sneak peek preview video of Dak's episode today.
I think it's important to recognize local heroes. To be deployed at 19 years old, 19 surgeries on his leg, no matter what adversity comes, that's who Derek Ross is. What happens when someone who spent their whole life giving to others finally gets something in return? We're going to be presenting his ultimate adventure truck.
Oh my gosh.
This is the story of unsung heroes, amazing trucks, and dreams that come true. I'm Dak Prescott, and this is the Truck It List.
So again, guys, that's amazing. As you can see here, guys, Dak Prescott, George Kittle, Travis Kelce are giving back compliments of at Real Truck. Go check them out on Instagram, or there's a link here below on YouTube. Go watch the full episode out right now, guys. Check it out. Amazing to see that these athletes have partnered up with Real Truck, given back to people that have contributed in society. Community heroes finally get something in return. Go watch these inspirational episodes and stories right now. Amazing. All right. So let's dive into this show now. If you're new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe. Starting off with the quarterback position here for the 3 games. Let's break down the 3 games here. We got Thanksgiving. We got Bills versus Detroit. We got the Giants versus the Cowboys, and both have been pretty good. Giants and Cowboys, mainly the Cowboys. They had a good game last week. Amazing versus Minnesota. And we got the Patriots and the Vikings here at 8:20. So 3 games on Thanksgiving. Are these the ideal games? These are the games I'd want to watch? Not really. I mean, I guess when they made these games, I expected the teams to be a little better than they have been. You know, Detroit, I don't know why they put them on a Thanksgiving game, but either way, I think it'll still be entertaining. We kind of see the heavy favorites here with Buffalo over Detroit and Dallas over the Giants. I mean, Dallas is an 8.5-point favorite. Either way, who do you start in these matchups? Now, based on matchups at the quarterback position, Josh Allen, Mac Jones, good matchup versus position, right? Minnesota, they have been giving up a lot of points, so Mac Jones is kind of set to have himself a decent game, but I don't really trust him. Dak Prescott, if you got him, obviously got to start him. He's been consistent every single week, although he does have the 10th hardest matchup versus position. Daniel Jones, coming off a hot week, getting those rushing touchdowns. 4th hardest matchup versus position. He's got it tough versus Dallas this week, so you may want to reconsider if you got a better quarterback option. Looking at the running backs going into the Thanksgiving games, now you've got Devin Singletary, who's had a couple consistent games, does have a good matchup versus Detroit. Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard both have a good matchup, splitting attempts. We saw it last week. Tony Pollard getting more fantasy points, getting involved in the receiving game. Zeke Elliott being more of a goal line guy. Definitely do have a good matchup this week. You want to start him. Jamal Williams, a touchdown monster, mid-range matchup this week versus Buffalo. Not the easiest matchup. Actually, it's about the 13th hardest versus position if you break it down on paper. Does have it in tough. Saquon Barkley playing this weekend, and he's playing against Dallas. Does have it in tough. Coming off a terrible 5.5 PPR point week. Does have it in tough this week, but you can't sit Saquon Barkley. And Dalvin Cook coming off a terrible game. Only 7 points last time he came out. And second hardest matchup versus position versus New England. So running backs that got it in tough on those matchups, obviously Saquon, Dalvin Cook, but how do you sit your starters? Very hard to do. Looking at the wide receiver position, Stephon Diggs, great matchup versus position. Amon-Ra St. Brown, great matchup. And again, we're just talking the Thursday games right now because some people want immediate answers. So I'm going to break down those 3 matchups, and we'll get to the entire week here. Again, we talked about Amon-Ra coming off a decent week, great matchup versus position. Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, tough matchup versus position. Again, they are playing the Giants. They tend to play wide receivers pretty tough. Be aware of that. Justin Jefferson coming off a terrible week has it in tough again against New England secondary. So expect, I wouldn't expect a huge game out of Jefferson, but you can't sit him. You got to start him, obviously. But again, he does have a tough matchup. So studs, Saquon Barkley, Jefferson coming off terrible weeks, have tough matchups this week. Something to note as we're going in, because some people get upset. Well, my guy's not doing well. Well, again, they have a tough matchup, okay? Tight end position here, guys, real quick. Dawson Knox, good matchup versus position for Detroit. TJ Hawkinson, he's on Minnesota now. If you guys aren't up to date, easy matchup versus New England. They play tight ends a little easier. Dalton Schultz coming off a mediocre 5-point game last outing, has a mid-range matchup this week, okay? Those are a couple tight ends here. If you want to know, Hunter Henry, good matchup as well versus Minnesota. Now, those are the matchups for Thursday to give you a breakdown. Defensively for those matchups, the easiest matchup is the Vikings defensively against New England. They just don't put up as many points. That's what it is. So Vikings on paper, out of all the matchups, have the easiest matchup, followed by Buffalo versus Detroit, then Cowboys versus the Giants, okay, based on the matchup. I mean, Cowboys have been a hot defense. If you got them, you definitely want to start them no matter who they're playing. So going again into the other games, the main games, guys, Sunday, Monday games. Let's talk about the optimal plays at each position. Again, if you're new to the channel, make sure you guys do subscribe. Go ahead and do that, guys, right now. All right, so let's talk about this. Davis Mills, I don't trust him, but he's got a good matchup versus Miami. Geno Smith, good matchup. Justin Herbert, Matt Stafford, Matt Ryan, Joe Burrow, Taylor Heineke, good matchup, but he's been crap lately. Lamar Jackson and Jimmy G, all good matchups versus position, followed by Derek Carr, who's coming off 3 hot weeks in fantasy. Been looking good for fantasy. Can't deny that, right? So those are your optimal matchups. Again, Herbert primed versus Arizona. Matt Stafford, he's a little banged up with the concussion, all that stuff. If he gets a start, he does have it in good versus KC. We know KC puts up a lot of points, but also gives up a lot of points. Now, the guys that have it in tough, but you do not want to sit. Jalen Hurts, right? Consistent as they come. 8th hardest matchup versus Green Bay, but you do not sit Jalen Hurts. You still start Jalen Hurts. Just be aware he's got it in a little bit tougher. Aaron Rodgers has got it in tough versus Philly. Hardest matchup versus position on paper. Do you start Aaron Rodgers? If you don't have a better option, you definitely start Aaron Rodgers, okay? Trevor Lawrence, I do like his matchup this week as well versus Baltimore. Justin Fields has been red hot. 9th hardest matchup versus position. Do you start him against the Jets? Yes, you still start Justin Fields. You still start Jalen Hurts. You still start Tua, who's got the 3rd hardest matchup versus position against Houston on paper. But Tua, Jalen, Justin, you do not sit these guys. You still start them. Aaron Rodgers is obviously in question. He's got a tough matchup versus Philly, but if you don't have a better quarterback option, then you go ahead and start yourself Aaron Rodgers. But those are your optimal matchups at each position, and some of the guys that got it in tough. Sticking with the optimal players here at the running back position now, I mean, you got to start Jeff Wilson coming off a hot week. Great matchup versus Houston. They put up they give up a lot of points to running backs. Probably the worst team against the rush. Jeff Wilson, prime position, have a good matchup this week. You got to start him, okay? Leonard Fournette, Uncle Lenny, who's been banged up. Rachaad White, whoever started. Check the injury status on Uncle Lenny. But Rachaad White, great matchup versus position versus Cleveland. You got to start him. Optimal, okay? Michael Carter, who's been really inconsistent. James Robinson, these guys have been absolutely sucking ever since the loss of Breece Hall with injury. They have not been doing well. But the Jets running backs, good matchup versus position. Latavius Murray with Denver. We have Melvin Gordon shipped off now. Melvin Gordon is gone. He's no longer with the team. Melvin Gordon is now done, free agent, fumbling way too much. Latavius Murray could have himself a great matchup based on position. Good matchup, so he could have himself a good game. Latavius Murray, especially a good DFS play for this week. Miles Sanders, good matchup. Josh Jacobs, great matchup this week versus Seattle. Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, great matchup. Austin Eckler, Mr. Consistent, great matchup versus Arizona this week. You may want to consider starting him. And Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, great matchup versus position. This is on paper. That being said, do I sit Christian McCaffrey? he's got a mid-range matchup. Absolutely not. You do not. Najee Harris coming off a hot week. He's got a mid-range matchup this week. It's going to be a little bit tough for him against Indiana. Is he going to succeed? I mean, if you got him, you need a running back, you start him, right? David Montgomery coming off a hot game, tougher matchup. Do you start him? Yes, you still start David Montgomery. You still start these guys. Cordell Patterson, tough matchup. Do you sit him? No. I mean, running backs are hard to come by. If they've been producing consistently, you still start them. I'm just making you aware that on paper, they have a tough matchup. Travis Etienne has a tough matchup versus Baltimore, fifth hardest versus position. You need to be aware of that before you start him. Maybe you have to make a decision. Do I start Etienne or do I start someone who's got a better matchup on your team? The guys I said have a better matchup, you may want to start them. Kenneth Walker, good matchup versus position versus Vegas. If you have him and Etienne, maybe you might want to lean Walker, predicated on matchup. It's up to you guys to make that decision. All right, guys? Alvin Kamara, tough matchup this week as well. Joe Mixon, who was banged up, apparently under concussion protocol, out dancing after he was sidelined in the back in the locker room, which was ridiculous. Tough matchup versus position. All right, just be aware, guys. I'm giving you guys the optimal matchups. I'm making suggestions, but you have to take a look at how that player's done over the past 3 weeks and make educated decisions. Oh, he's like Justin Fields. He's got like 7 consistent games. He's got a tough matchup this week. Do I sit Justin Fields? No, I still start the guy that's hot. I don't sit him, all right? Moving on to wide receivers. Pittman, great matchup versus position this week, and all of the Colts wide receivers here. Obviously, great matchups. T. Higgins, great matchup. Cincinnati versus Tennessee. Got to start him. Washington receivers, Terry McLaurin, great matchup. We got other guys here. Van Jefferson. Now, here's the thing. Cooper Kupp's gone. Who's going to get the bulk load of the volume? It might lean towards Allen Robinson here, all right? 15 points last game. Allen Robinson versus KC, great matchup. Van Jefferson could get some volume. Again, it's a bit of a crapshoot. We saw Tutu Atwell get a touchdown, right? Who would ever thought to start Tutu Atwell? Nobody starts Tutu Atwell. He may get another touchdown. It's a bit of a crapshoot there with the Rams wide receivers, but they've got a great matchup. The big question is, who do you start? I don't know. No, it's anyone that tells you they know don't really know. They're just saying, oh, just start that guy. It's a guess. Nobody really knows. It's ultimately fantasy roulette when it comes to the wide receivers with the Rams at this point, right? Christian Kirk, always clear-cut start. He's been hot. He's been consistent, and he's got a great matchup versus Baltimore. I cannot emphasize Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk this week. On paper, looks amazing. You definitely want to consider starting him. Deebo Samuel versus the New Orleans, coming off that hot week, 22 points. You definitely want to start him. Mike Evans, good matchup this week. Tampa Bay versus Cleveland. Definitely want to consider them. And when you're looking at the wide receivers for KC, they've got a good matchup. But again, who's the guy there? Obviously, it's Travis Kelce. But after that, it's a bit of a crapshoot. Does Juju come back? Marquise Valdez-Scantling sucked. Justin Watson had a catch and run. Tony can't stay healthy. It's a bit of a disaster. I'd probably go Sky Moore, if anything, here with KC if you're looking at wide receiver. Chris Olave, definitely want to start as well. Good matchup versus position, all right? The guys I did not mention have mid-range matchups or tougher matchups versus position. That being said, do I sit a Tyreek Hill who's got the 6th hardest matchup versus position versus Houston? Absolutely not. You start your Tyreek Hill. You start your Adams, who's got a tough matchup versus Seattle. You start Justin Jefferson. Now you're saying, well, Joe, you're telling me, obviously, do I start these guys? So obviously I start them. It's not, though, because a lot of people are trying to be torn. They're torn between decisions. Do I start them? Now here's one, right? Christian Watson versus Alan Lazard. Who do I start? I'm going to roll with the hot hand in Watson, who's been getting the touchdowns, who's being looked at in the end zone, who's been hotter the past 2 weeks. I'm just going to roll the young upside Watson train, but they both have a tough matchup versus position versus Philly. Do I sit Watson? No. 8th hardest matchup versus position. I still start him. Treylon Burks, hard matchup coming off some decent weeks lately. Treylon Burks, do I sit him? No. I'm still going to start Treylon Burks if I need a wide receiver. He actually had one hot week, 21 points. Prior to that, not really, but maybe that's a sign of heating up. Treylon Burks, tough matchup versus position, but I still want to consider starting him. Hopkins, obviously, start him. Tough matchup versus position, all right? So, again, the guys I mentioned, Tyreek Hill, Hopkins, right? Watson, tougher matchups, but definitely do want to start them. It's good that I'm talking about this, making you aware that the matchup is not optimal. So that if you do have a down week, you're like, well, the counselor said, they're a great player, but I should temper my expectations a little bit that there possibly may be a tough game for them up ahead based on the corners that they face. Okay, that's wide receiver. Moving on to tight end. Tight end, I'm not going to talk about. Start your most consistent tight end. Going in now, NFL Week 12, you should know who your tight ends are. You should know who's performing. But obviously, you're going to start Kelce. You're going to start Everett. You're going to start Freermoth, you're going to start. Hayden Hurst has been boring. You know, you got to start him if you got him. I mean, you want your 10 points. Kittle's got a tough matchup coming off that hot week. He's playing the Saints. They play tight ends tougher. 24 points last week. Kittle, tough matchup. You still want to start him. Higbee, he's been kind of on and off. He's been safe the past 2 weeks. You definitely want to consider starting Higbee, obviously, with Kupp being gone. Kmet's been pretty solid. Had a down week this week, but definitely want to start Cole Kmet. So when I'm looking at these tight ends, you want to take a look and say, hey, how have they done over the past 3 weeks? Okay. Am I going to get my 10 points? Okay. If I'm going to get my 10 points and they look solid, the matchup looks good, I may want to consider starting them. Okay. So those are some tight ends. And you, again, if they're hot, you start them. If they're consistent, you start them. Very, very simple. Defenses to stream, guys, this week. Let's talk about it. Chiefs versus the Rams. I mean, we know that the Chiefs could give up a lot of points, but the Rams, they've been kind of rough lately. It's a tough one, but the Chiefs could be a good streaming defense with some upside. They've had 9 points last week, 6 the week before. They've been a safe defense, nothing to get excited about. Steelers now with Watt back playing Indy. I mean, it could be a good defense to start this week. They could be. They're kind of heating up as a defense. Could put up some points. Jets versus Chicago. I'm a little suspect about this one. I mean, this is the way I've got this algorithm set up. It's kind of predicated on the year. We know Chicago's been heating up. But the Jets, if you are desperate for a defense, consider them. Dolphins versus Houston. I do like this defense matchup versus Houston. 49ers versus the Saints because their quarterbacks have been a disaster. Suspect offense. They had a decent week last week, but 49ers versus Saints, good matchup. Colts versus Pittsburgh and Broncos versus Carolina. Now, you may want to consider Panthers versus Denver. Coming off a couple decent games, 9 and 8 points for the Panthers. May want to consider them as well. Okay, and Bears versus the Jets. Jets have been, hit or miss. So, couple matchups there for you guys defensively. Chiefs, Steelers, Jets, Dolphins, 49ers, Colts, Broncos, Panthers, Falcons, even versus Washington. But again, you want to take a look and see, this is very, very important, guys, how consistent they've been over the past 3 weeks. And when you are streaming a defense, you have to take a look at that. If not, start your consistent defense if you've got one of those. Like I got Buffalo, right? So I've been starting Buffalo pretty much every week, but they're not on bye, right? All right, guys. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you guys do subscribe. All right. Now head over again to thetruckitlist.com. Go watch the videos, guys, right now. Amazing, amazing stuff, what they're doing there with the giving back to community heroes. Definitely go check that out. All right, guys, if you're new to the channel, subscribe, thumbs up. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Go back and watch again. If you have any questions, drop them below. We'll talk soon. I'm out.